Hi and welcome to today's vlog. Now, just for the benefit of those who may happen to be joining me for the first time, my name is Steve Clark. I am now a retired Methodist minister, recently retired, moved to Doncaster, back to Doncaster, where we were for 12 years some time ago. But anyway, it's great to be back and beginning to meet up with some former friends or friends who we know from here. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult now with still with the coronavirus situation and the restrictions on what you can and cannot do. But there you go. It's good to be back, and we're beginning to settle into life in retirement. Lots of things still to do in terms of sorting the house out and everything else, but things are good. Indeed, I was invited because I've moved into a new Methodist district. I was invited to a Zoom welcome for people moving into the district, which will take place later this afternoon. Obviously, normally that would be a physical meeting in a building somewhere, but due to coronavirus, that's not happening in that way. So it's a Zoom meeting, and the exciting news is that those who are taking part have been sent a cream tea pack, which arrived on our doorstep yesterday. So that came all the way from Devon, and 4 lovely scones, 4 little pots of strawberry jam, and a couple of cartons of clotted cream. So I'm looking forward to tasting that delight later on. That won't do my blood pressure any good, but it'll do my taste buds the world of good. Now, what I want to share with you today is 2 things that have come together really in my reading. First of all, yesterday when I've been writing out Mark's Gospel, little passages at a time, and yesterday I was looking at that passage in Mark chapter 5, where Jesus is, as usual, surrounded by a large crowd, and a man called Jairus, who is the synagogue leader, comes to him in real desperation. Jairus' daughter is very, very sick, very poorly, near death, and he begs Jesus to go with him to heal her. He says, "Please come and place your hands on her, heal her so she can live." And Jesus responds, and he begins to go with Jairus. Now, on the journey, again, the crowds are following him. There's this woman who's been sick herself. Had a hemorrhage, or she'd been bleeding for 12 years. She's been to all the doctors and spent all her money, but she's still not any better. In fact, she's worse. And in her desperation, after 12 years of sickness, she realises Jesus is there, and she comes up in the crowd and touches his cloak, reaches out in faith, and she is instantly healed. And Jesus turns around and says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples say, "Well, the crowd's all around you. How can you ask that question?" But then he sees the woman, and she says, "It's me who touched her." And he says to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you or healed you." So that's kind of a bit of a delay on the journey to Jairus' daughter. And then, as they begin to continue the journey, some people come from Jairus' home to say, bring the bad news that Jairus' daughter is dead. And so it seems there's no point in Jesus going now. But instead of just forgetting about it all, Jesus says, "Why all this weeping and commotion? The child isn't dead, she's asleep." "Oh, she's only asleep." And people laugh at Jesus, but you probably know the story. He goes into the room where the little girl is lying, apparently dead, in her bed. He takes into the room only her parents, mum and dad, and Peter, James and John, who'd taken with him. And he just touches the little girl and he says, "Little girl, get up." And she miraculously comes back to life, and he gives her back to her parents. It's a wonderful story. It's interesting that the woman who'd been healed on the journey, this woman who'd been suffering from bleeding, had been suffering from bleeding for 12 years, and the little girl who Jesus brings back to life is 12 years old. Is there a significance in that? I don't know, but it's an interesting thought. But the passage I really want to bring out to you, 6 words that if we take them seriously actually could change our lives, change a person's life. When the people come from Charity's home to say that don't bother anymore, that the girl's dead, Jesus says to Jairus these 6 words: don't be afraid, just trust me. Don't be afraid, just trust me. And if only we as followers of Jesus could really take that on board, to realise that we are absolutely secure in him. And he says to us too, don't be afraid, just trust me. And I'm reminded of that old song that I really love, where the chorus is, trust and obey. For there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. And that ties in with a marvellous book I'm in the midst of reading. It's called Miracle Lives of China by Jonathan and Rosalind Goforth. Now, they were missionaries. What a great name for a missionary, Goforth. They served as missionaries. In fact, there's a picture of them in their later years. They were Canadian missionaries who worked for many, many years in China. And this book is all about them, the wonderful things that God did through them and others, lives that were transformed, people who were hardened against the gospel, and yet Jesus transformed their lives. They became evangelists and witnesses. The missionaries in China faced great opposition, and yet there was a great revival that took place. It's a wonderful book, and I'm just reading. It's really about lots of different people whose lives were changed, and there's a particular passage in the book that I'm just come across at the moment, and it's about a time when Goforth and the Goforths were really struggling, heavy burden. This thing, so much need, and yet there's so few people, and they prayed, and God sent them people to help them. And he talks about how, reflecting back on the years, how so many people had come to faith through his ministry, through their ministry. And he says, I can count about 50 men who have become evangelists and pastors, all of whom were induced to enter the service of the kingdom by the grace of God through me. So he's saying how much God has used him to draw people into God's service. And he goes on to say this: I say this not for self-glorification, but to impress upon especially young missionaries the fact that, and this is the key part of the sentence, definite faith in God and obedience will certainly bring results. It seems to me that in my mind those two extracts from those 2 different books really tie together. Goforth saying that the importance of faith in God and obedience to what God says is really, really the key to fruitfulness. Do we really trust God? Do we really are ready to say yes to what he says? And are we willing to take on board the words of Jesus? Don't be afraid, just trust me. Don't be afraid, just trust me. So if you like, that's the message for today, and indeed for our lives of following Jesus. Don't be afraid, just trust him. So whatever you're going through, maybe some of you are facing difficult times, don't be afraid. Just trust the Lord Jesus. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening today.